Hello and welcome to our annual Donald Cheney Award celebration. I'm Michael Perkins, the Executive Director of the Orange County Regional History Center and the MC for this evening's celebration. We're honored this year that our Historical Society has chosen Francina Boykin, President of the Apopka Historical Society and longtime researcher and historian of the Ocoee Voting Day Massacre of 1920, as this year's awardee. We're glad that you've joined us this evening, and we encourage you to use the chat feature in Zoom to provide Francina with your congratulations and best wishes on her award-winning evening. I'm sure that she'll appreciate it and read them all. Before we get to this evening's speakers, I would like to give a brief overview of the Donald Cheney Award and its significance. The award is named for Donald Cheney, who founded the original Historical Commission in 1957. Donald was the son of John Moses Cheney, who briefly served as a federal judge, although he was never actually confirmed by the Senate. Judge John Cheney lived a remarkable life, serving as a Republican lawyer here in Orlando in the early 1900s when the area was substantially Democratic. He sang opera most of the time when reviewing his case files, and he created the area's first local water company, the precursor to today's Orlando Utility Commission.
Want me to go?
Judge Cheney ran for numerous public offices and always lost. He also encouraged the disenfranchised Black community to vote, taking on the KKK and public opinion. Cheney Highway, the first road connecting Orlando to the East Coast, was named for him. His son Donald continued his father's work. He was born in 1889 and lived to see Orlando grow from a small southern village to the post-Disney metropolis it became when he passed away in 1983. He became a juvenile court judge, Rollins College trustee, and served on the boards of various civic foundations. In 1957, he worked with Orange County to create the Historical Commission. Donald Cheney became the first executive director of the commission and selected the museum's first curator, Gene Yothers. Donald worked tirelessly to preserve the small collection of historical artifacts that the early Historical Society began collecting in 1941. Working with Orange County, he saw to the creation of the first museum for the organization, located in Lock Haven Park in the 1970s. The History Center is the legacy of Donald Cheney, and it is up to us to continue to preserve our local and regional history and tell the stories of our past. This award, the Donald Cheney Award, is named after a man who realized the importance and meaning of history and how important it is to tell the stories of our past so that we can learn to be better citizens. Some of our previous awardees include Gene Yothers, the first curator of the Historical Museum when it was first located at Lock Haven Park, and Orville Davis, longtime educator and briefly superintendent of Orange County Public Schools. Other previous winners include West Orange County Citrus Baron Jerry Chicone Jr. and Joy Wallace Dickinson for her years of work writing about and presenting Central Florida history. We've also recognized the Reverend Canon Nelson Pinder for his civil rights work and how he changed the community for the better, and James Chief Wilson for his longtime service to Jones High School and commitment to preserving its history. Last year's awardee, Farrell Livingston, has worked to record and preserve the history of Hannibal Square in Winter Park. Today's Donald Cheney Award recipient, Francina Boykin, lives up to these high standards. Before we hear from Francina, we have two people who will talk about her and her impact on our history. First will be Curtis Michelson, an original member of the Democracy Forum who worked with Francina for years researching the Ocoee Voting Day Massacre. After Curtis, we will hear from Sandra Cawthern. Sandra has known Francina for many years, also working together with the Democracy Forum to bring information about the Ocoee Voting Day Massacre to light. First, I'd like to welcome to the program Curtis Michelson.
Thank you, Michael. Appreciate it. I'm hoping this is coming through fine. Okay. Hey there. Francina Boykin. Just saying her name makes me smile. there's friends in a life, and there are colleagues, and there are comrades, and occasionally you get all those in a package. And in Francina, I lucked out. My friend, my colleague, my comrade, I am honored to introduce you today. Well, first, let me tell you how I met Francina, who we call Fran or Franny, or sometimes by her email handle, Boykin Franny B. In 1996, a group of Unitarian Universalist church members were having dialogues around racism, or more specifically, anti-racism. Almost all white members of this congregation, a church with a proud local civil rights history. And so we were, in keeping with our tradition, asking, what next? What next to heal our divide? And that fall in 1996, an African-American woman named Diana Mitchell came to us in one of our dialogues, and she mentioned in passing the Ocoee event. It was said as if it was a known fact, and many in the room let it pass, but it triggered a memory in me. So let me just roll back 3 years earlier, when I had tried to help a friend, a Black friend named Otis McCaster, land a job, and it was at an Ocoee radio station. I knew Clive Thomas, the late night host, and I sort of pulled a favor, white privilege in action. I helped a brother get a job. Otis went out there a couple times, and he told me a police officer had tailed him and he wasn't going back. I didn't understand it at the time. I just thought maybe he didn't want to do it. Kind of typical white liberal. And then fast forward back to Diana's comment, and it hit me like a ton of bricks. There's something I didn't know. There was a real history there that I didn't know about. And we knew, people like Sandy and myself and others that were in these dialogues, we needed a project. And so we needed a multiracial, diverse group to do that work. And the only thing we didn't know at that point was we were missing one critical piece, and that was Francina. But Francina found us quickly because Diana Mitchell invited her in. Diana and Fran grew up in Apopka, longtime friends. And Fran immediately had stories and family members to connect us to. I'm pretty sure she helped us find people like Jack Hameter, the grandson of Annie Hameter. And of course, she brought us Miss Mildred Board, a woman who had lived through the massacre and saw the flames and smoke from a distance away in Apopka. Only Francina had all these connections, and she graciously, generously brought all of them and all of her hundreds of hours of volunteer time to this work. And we would meet every week up at the Farm Workers Center in Apopka, where we were hosted graciously by the Farm Workers Sisters. And, doing this work, actually trying to do this kind of work with such tender topics in a mixed group of young, old students, professors, activists, retirees, Black, white, and so on, you quickly see who has the ability to stick it out, to stay through the tears, through the arguments, and there were many, and who can be tested by fire. Francina was that rock in our project. Truly, many times she held us together when we could have easily fallen apart. She also stabilized our perspectives, like when I, for example, felt that someone like Lester Dabbs or the Salisburys or other white Ocoee descendants might have been sort of justifying the atrocity in their own way, and I couldn't bear to talk to them. But it was Fran who said to me, it's okay, Curtis. She stayed friends with Lester Dabbs all the way through until his passing. And she took many a phone call from Sam Salisbury's grandson, Jim Fleming. Thank you so much, Fran, because I couldn't do it. I was too angry, but Francina stood through it all. When I really got to know Fran, it was our first research road trip together to Jacksonville. We were heading to University of North Florida, her alma mater, because of their NAACP anti-lynching microfilms. They had some of the best archives there. And the State of Florida Vital Statistics Office, where we might get lucky and get a copy of July Perry's death certificate. That day, we hit the mother lode of material. Not only did we find Annie Hameter's now infamous and haunting letter, the one that's on display in your current exhibit, but also because of Fran's quick improvisation, posing as a distant relative of the Perrys, she sweet-talked the state administrator into printing us a certified copy of July Perry's death certificate. Whoa. And it was on that trip, as Francina drove me through her old college stomping grounds, I learned about the deep impression made on her by one professor and one class called, I think, Fran, A Study in Black and White. This was the late 60s, and Fran is basically in a race encounter class where the teacher asks students to hold nothing back, say how they feel about each other. He even has Black students stay in white homes and white students in Black homes for a semester. I mean, this was leading edge stuff. And Fran told me how much that one class moved her. She would refer back to that experience on numerous occasions during our Democracy Forum work together. You see, what you learn when you work with Fran on any project is that she is positive and unfaltering in her commitments. Even when our work had mostly cooled off by the early 2000s, Fran kept going, serving as our de facto ambassador, taking calls from researchers and journalists and even Black descendants who had come to discover the work and their own family story. She was the one who would answer the phone calls, respond to those emails. Thank you, Fran. It was Francina, you all should know right here and now, who safely kept and guarded our group's paper research archives in her garage. I held down the digital on my side, but Fran had all the rest. You historians with us today, you should visit those archives and check them out. Fran's imprint, her work is all over them. So you get the idea. When you need to get something done, you need a Francina. Or as Pam Schwartz said on a call recently, every community needs a Francina. Over the years, Fran has often ribbed me and said, Curtis, what did you get me into here? But I could tell by her laugh and tone, it was meant to be. That project was meant to be. Francina was meant to be. She was on mission and on purpose. To work with Fran on a history project is to see someone come alive with their gifts, whether it's the Apopka History Center she's minding or staging a play on the history of Apopka, or seeing her take on the character of one of the original Apopka slaves, Sarah Mead. In those moments, you see a storyteller par excellence. Nobody captures story as good as Fran because she loves to hear other stories. I know this is a big statement, but it's my honest assessment after 20 plus years working with Francina. She is truly our Central Florida heir to Zora Neale Hurston. She is a chronicler of our local history like none other, with an ear for nuance, a heart of gold, and a gift for gab and spinning yarns. We are blessed and so lucky to have Francina Boykin as Central Florida's own. And I must say, in closing, if you get a chance to work with Fran, you're going to have a lot of fun. She even taught me the electric slide at a dive bar in South Apopka one night. Working with Fran, you literally get to dance. And so with that, now I invite my good friend and fellow Democracy Forum veteran and Unitarian Church member, Sandy Cawthern, to share her impressions of Francina. Sandy?
Francine, you're still on, Sandy, you're still on mute.
Okay, now? Do you have it? Hello?
You're good.
Oh, good, thank you. Francina Boykin, where wisdom of the people dwell. Ocoee, massacre of lives, of generations, of the tearing of the land from their hands, of a livelihood, an original sin that could not be hidden for all time, the shadow. The silenced knowledge spoke, came alive when a small group started messing around in the shadow. The Democracy Forum, Francina Boykin, a life force that will not be denied. Folks live on in Francina by her recounting of their stories. Here are a few. Borders Bookstore in Ocoee. After our first forum, Francina related a time she'd gone to the town and asked, "Where are all the people buried that got killed over there?" Everybody looked at her like, "What do you mean?" She said, "They said there was a group of Black people died over here. Do you know where they are buried?" Then she continued to say, "I tell Black people all the time now, you don't want to put other people in charge of your history. You cannot do that. If you want your history known, you have to be a part of that process. You cannot put white people in charge of researching your history if you want to get the details of it." I appreciate her wisdom. The Gladdens. She said, "You can tell I'm always working on something. Mr. Michael Gladden Jr. We would have what we call our Saturday morning forums. I remember her recounting finding a receipt for a Black man paying his 1876 taxes. She added, Mr. Gladden steered the Black peoples in this community through the Great Depression. Receipts showed that Black people gave him their money for safekeeping because he kept their money in the store safe." Once Francina began by saying, "It's divine how people are connected." AP reporter Alan Breed heard about survivor Valentine Hightower in his 90s. He brought him back to spend the day in Ocoee just to hear the stories he told about when they were fleeing Ocoee. Mr. Hightower pointed out were certain groves and drainage ditches. Francina says, "I go through there and I see this trench and I think of Mr. Hightower." When Mr. Breed came, Mr. Hightower said, "What took you so long?" Francina said, "People started opening up, talking about it with me, but for so long they had been silent." This is Francina. Her people are alive. I think she can talk to the end of time and not finish all she knows. And now I have the pleasure of introducing the winner of the Donald J. Cheney Award, Francina Boykin, for unfailing dedication to the area's history. Thank you.
Wow. Good evening, everyone. I would like to thank the Regional History Center's Board of Directors, the constituencies, benefactors, and partners and beyond, and the central citizens of Central Florida, and especially my family, who forever are listening to my stories. I am lost for words. I am in awe. Being nominated for the Donald Cheney Award is an incredible honor. I will often say to people, I am not a historian. I'm just a person who loves history. Being born in Apopka some few decades ago, I have found it fascinating to tell the stories of those who were before me. I have learned that history is not always taught in a classroom. History can be taught under a tree with a group of old timers, or like our famous writer Zora Neale Hurston, who would once upon a time sit on the gatepost in Eatonville, watching people go to and fro, traveling through Eatonville. She would often ask them, "Oh, where are you going? When are you coming back?" She was just a young girl at that time. And she said, "Well, I can dance for you." Or back in the day, as we would say, "I'll go piece of the way with you." People like Zora Neale Hurston and my dear colleague and late friend, William File P. Ryan Slim Gladden. I was under Mr. Gladden's tutelage for nearly 15 years. Almost every night when I got off work, I would visit with Mr. Gladden. His family was a very prominent early settler. They were very early settlers to Apopka. We would talk for hours about the different people who came to Apopka, and he would often tell me, Francina, the Black man didn't come to Apopka begging. And he would go on to tell me about all the people who settled here, that many early Black settlers came as independent farmers, worked on the railroad, and worked at one of Apopka's major employers, which was a crate mill company where they made crates for citrus. Oftentimes, if you come to Apopka, you may find me sitting under this tree with a group of old timers. Often say they're spitting, they tell, well, we call it the lying corner. There's always tales. For example, I'll share one with you. There was a man who once had a mule, and it had been a drought that summer, and the grass had turned brown. So this particular farmer went and bought his mule some sunglasses. I know. He put the mule, the reason why the story became prevalent because the man had an injured arm, and it was where the mule had bit him. As he would put the sunglasses on the mule so that they would be green shaded, he thought the mule would eat the grass. And these are the kind of tales that we sit and we talk for hours. Some days, if I take a vacation from work, it's just to sit under the tree to hear some of these stories. Growing up in Apopka, I often spent time playing in the woods and playing games. People often say to me, why is it that you love Apopka so much? I love Apopka because of its simplicity. I love its people. I'm always there for them. I often find myself just walking and talking to people all around. I can never get enough of the people. I have often talked to parents, and I tell parents how important it is to share your history with your children. It's so important. It does not matter where you were born. In Apopka, we have different neighborhoods. In growing up, we have the quarters. Everybody lived in the quarters. And that was one quarter that was in particular. It was named the Graveyard Quarters. The Graveyard Quarters was located near a cemetery. And I won't forget when we had integrated schools in 1969, I was a part of the mass desegregation court order. So some white students was asking me where was some of my friends live. I said, oh, that person lives in the graveyard. Well, they said, they live in the graveyard? I'm like, yeah, not thinking that I was outside of my community, that people wouldn't understand where the graveyard quarters were. And that's why I tell family members to tell your children that it does not matter where you grew up at, if it was the graveyard quarters or the brown quarters or the red quarters. We had a host of quarters. And in these communities, they were quite quaint. I often remember backyard gatherings where we, those of us who still eat meat, it was hog killing time. And at hog killing time, we would sit in the backyard as children. The old people would tell us stories while we were by the light of the fire, while they was what we call dressing the hog. These kind of stories, and for the people, I am the voice of those who have long ago been forgotten. And when I say forgotten, it is that their stories had not been handed down. When I discovered the early Black settlers came to Apopka in the late 1800s after the Civil War, and namely Sarah Mead. Sarah Mead introduced many of the early Black settlers. All history is so important. Being a member of the Apopka Historical Society have given me more insight to know that everybody's history is important. The great contributions made by early settlers. I can never fill their shoes, but I'm always willing to share their stories. My mother and my grandmother moved to Florida, Apopka, Florida in the early 1940s. She told me she was tired of picking cotton for 40 cents on 100 pounds. That they told her in Apopka, money was growing on trees. And that means oranges. You could pick more oranges than you could cotton. You could make more money. And I'm also fascinated by a gentleman who in this day and time would be he would be considered a real estate mogul. His name was Mr. L.T. Hunt. I find his deeds quite fascinating in that in his deeds, he writes, all properties should be sold to no one but persons of Ethiopian descent. I have not figured it out yet, but Mr. Hunt was kind of funny because he walked off the property. And oftentimes I tell planners who come to this area, Orange County planners, these are some of the properties that belong to Mr. Hunt. His subdivision was known as Oak Lawn. He walked it off, walking it off by the foot, wherever his property line, wherever his cigarette butt or his water tobacco ended, that was the property line. I tell that story all the time because I find it quite funny that, because I knew Mr. Hunt as a young girl, and to picture him walking off property and dropping a cigarette butt or spitting out a water tobacco, it explains why many of the properties now you have houses in the middle of streets. And another friend of mine, Mr. Wilbert Chisholm, he said it depends on which direction he was walking. If he was walking north or south, the numbers don't add up. And even to this day, they don't add up. So stories of that sort and the collection of history from the past is what I've learned to appreciate and embrace. I am so honored tonight. And when I was called and said that we're going to honor you, I'm like, really? For history? I said, all I do is run my mouth all the time talking to people. And oftentimes, if I go shopping with a family member, they're like, oh no, we'll never get through shopping because she's going to be talking the whole while. And I must say to my family at Boykin, Mons, where I have been an employee for 33 years, it put me in line with many people throughout Central Florida. I've traveled Central Florida throughout. Every trip or assignment that I've been on to meet with clients, I make it a purposeful trip because there's something significant about a town or a city. I often tell people, embrace your history, share your history, because this is what happened with the descendants of the Ocoee massacre. No one talked for almost a century. All this built up pain and anger and frustration. Growing up, I didn't know why people did not go to Ocoee. I just knew or thought it was a town for white people only and that we should always avoid it. But what I've learned in the last 22 years, and I must say, Curtis and Sandy, Democracy Forum will be with me until the end. What we did 22 years ago, it has become a very valuable part of my life that I can share with my grands and great-grands and stories to come on how people can work together, working together for a purpose. I won't forget the first day. I don't know how I got to be the one to be first on the podium to introduce Democracy Forum to the citizens of Ocoee when we unveiled our research. That day, I would question myself, what have I gotten myself into? I had taken a photo with Mayor Scott Vandegrift, and I said that picture is worth 1,000 words, because on the first day I met him at Borders Books, I'm like, oh no, here he comes. He's not happy at all. But through being persistent and working as a group, and it was a very silent type protest, a protest with meaning and purpose. And I am so proud of all the staff and people at the Regional History Center. I know sometimes I can just go on and on and on. And when I do, just tell me, friend, that's enough. Okay, we've heard enough. But it's a passion. It's something that I love. I love people, and I always want to be where I can help people. So with all of that said, I again am so honored to share the Don A. Cheney Award. I read about Mr. Cheney, Mr. Donald Cheney. I had never heard of him before. I heard of his daddy, John, and I know that he did very awesome work. And he handed that down to his son. His son did not miss a beat. And to be the person that he was, to share and preserve and serve, is what we're all about. I wish everyone well out there, and hey, your history matters. Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Francina, and our heartfelt congratulations from the Historical Society. Everybody watching, you'd be hearing applause now if we weren't virtual. So unfortunately, you don't hear any of that, but it's out there, trust me. We also want to thank Curtis and Sandy for taking time to recognize our very deserving 2020 Donald Cheney awardee. Before we close for the evening, I'd like to introduce Lenny Bendo, the Historical Society of Central Florida Board President, for a few closing remarks. Please take it away, Lenny.
Thank you, Michael. And thank you to all of you who have joined us this evening for our first virtual Donald A. Cheney Award event. I am on site at the History Center in front of our historic Ocoee exhibit. And I'd like to take a moment to share about the Historical Society of Central Florida and our unique partnership with Orange County to bring you the History Center. We've seen a change in our team and on our board, and we've also seen a change in the strategic plan. You've probably seen the beginnings of a full-scale renovation of the permanent exhibition spaces, which is now in progress. And as you may know, in just 4 years, the History Center has been the recipient of several top national awards, including the National Medal from the Institute of Museum and Library Services. These awards and recognition are due in part to the revamp and execution of our new strategic plan, mission, and vision. So how can you help us fulfill our mission and vision here in Central Florida? One of the ways to support the Society is to help us celebrate the History Center's 20th anniversary with our $20 for 20 years fall fundraiser. Anything you can do to support the Society supports the History Center and preserves our history here in Central Florida. Please check our website to donate to our fall campaign, renew your Society membership, and stay posted on all of our events. Please come by the History Center to learn about the tragic but incredibly important history surrounding the Ocoee Massacre. Tonight's honoree, Francina Boykin, was instrumental in the research behind the exhibit. So congratulations again, Ms. Boykin, on your well-deserved award. It was our honor. Thank you for joining us this evening. To everyone, stay safe, stay hopeful, and have a good night.
Thank you too.